Hello and welcome to the Roy Rogers News Channel. Thank you so much for watching. And for today's fun-loaded episode, we're going to dive into a fun ability known as Sturdy. And I would like to thank our friend Cobnut for writing a lovely comment about this ability. Well, not necessarily about this ability specifically, but he wrote about Focus Sash. Let's go and read what our friend Cobnut has to say here. Thank you for covering this topic. Glad I can help out with the video idea. Cloyster plus Excadrill or Haxorus as backup really can smash through just about every opponent in story mode. If you have a Focus Sash, Stealth Rock, Suicide lead, then they can be able to power through the Elite Four. And here's my response to that comment. You are welcome. I am glad that you enjoyed the episode. Of note, instead of running Focus Sash, I think a sturdy Stealth Rocker lead would be more cost effective. And that, my friends, is where this idea is spawned. So I would like to thank our friend Cobnut for coming up with this lovely idea about Sturdy. And with me now, to my right, is a certain shadow that I found. I mean, in game, I see a shadow underneath, but also, to my right here, there's a player here by the name of Shadow. So, would you like to say hello, Shadow?
What a casualty, right, Roy? What's up?
Hey, there we go. And if you were in Pokemon Coliseum or Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, I would be throwing Master Balls at you. So, just be thankful you're not in Pokemon Coliseum or Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness.
I'm actually thankful for being here again with you, Mike.
Oh, thank you, man. Yeah, certainly. I love having you back on the program. Alright, and without further ado, Shadow, are you ready to dive into this fun-filled ability known as Sturdy?
I'm not ready, but we'll pull this through. Let's go ahead.
Excellent. All right. So you might be asking us, hey, Roy and Shadow, so what does Sturdy mean? And that's a good question. Well, Sturdy Pokemon cannot be knocked out in one hit. However, abilities like Mold Breaker or Reactive Gas can override this benefit. Now, Pokemon that come to mind here are Pokemon like Haxorus with Mold Breaker, as I discussed in the Mold Breaker video, or Reactive Gas with Wheezing, but then again, most of these Pokemon that we're about to feature here are resistant to most of Wheezing's moves, so you don't have to really worry about Wheezing too much. So, just keep that in mind, and Shadow, do you have any commentary about Sturdy?
For PvP purposes, Sturdy pretty much seems like a useful ability, as you have probably said before, like Steel Rock and Sturdy is pretty much good combo to override possible Focus Sashes or enemy Stardust from NPCs, right? So I think it's a good topic to bring here.
Excellent. Alright, and without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into our Sturdy Pokemon right now. And I would like to give a brief prerequisite like I always do. And here's my prerequisite. I don't want to talk about every evolution, and the reason why is because if I do, then this video is going to take quite a long time to cover. So I'm going to cover the maximum evolution Pokemon, so I would like to give that brief rule. So, sorry Geodude and Graveler, sorry Magnemite and Magneton, and everybody else, I can't cover you, because otherwise this video is going to take a long time. So, Shadow, are you ready to dive into our Mold Breaker Pokemon?
Let's go ahead, my god.
Excellent! Alright, let's go and dive into our very first Pokemon right now. Golem. Now, Golem is in the Mineral Egg group, so that should be pretty easy to breed up. Just Rock Smash a few things and be able to get Geodude and Graveler, and you can get your breeders together. But, you might be asking me, hey Roy, why would I want to make a Golem? And that's a good question. And here's your answer. One of the benefits is that you have at your disposal a base 120 base attack stat, and that is pretty nice to hit your opponents. And if you are lucky enough to be able to be faster than your opponent, let's just say that you're able to set up your rocks first and then you can be faster, you go to retaliate with something like an earthquake or something of the sort. I can get to why Golem outspeeding stuff is a big deal later, but in the meantime I'm going to discuss more of its perks. It is a rock type, meaning that it can resist a fair amount of normal type Pokemon, which is pretty useful considering the fact that there's a fair amount of Pokemon in story mode that are normal type. And also would like to mention another fact that Golem is actually really easy to get. Well, more specifically, Geodude and Graveler They're really easy to get. And then Graveler, you just need to ask somebody to trade, and you can be able to trade either me or Shadow or a moderator in game, and they can be able to give you a Golem, but you have to do a trade Evo first. Now make sure you don't over level things like Graveler, and that's actually going to be one of its cons, is that the fact that it is a trade evolution. So what that means is that you're going to have to keep that Pokemon right below the obedience level cap. So that way you can be able to trade a moderator and you can be able to evolve your Graveler without struggling and trying to go through the story with the Graveler. So that's one of the drawbacks of running with a Golem. Another drawback is that speed stat that I mentioned. It is based at 45. That's pretty slow considering the fact that the story mode, there's a fair amount of Pokemon that are pretty fast paced. I'm thinking about Pokemon like Starmie and that sort of thing. So when you're running things like Golem, you want to make sure you have a game plan and know what you want to do. And also of note, Golem can learn not only Stealth Rock, but it can also learn Counter. So what does that mean for you? And that's a good question. And this is the part where you start switching Golem into things like Machamp, because you can be able to survive Machamp, especially when you're fighting against Bruno of the Elite Four. I mean, he certainly comes to mind when I think of a fight with physical Pokemon. Then Golem just hits hard the Pokemon with Counter, and you go to knock out the Pokemon. So that's something that's really nice about Golem. So, Shadow, do you have any commentary to say about our friend Golem here?
A part of the stuff you said, which is, I think, completely right. I would like to address the fact that you don't need to spend cash in TMs aside of Steel Rock, because Golem learns Explosion, Self-Destruct, Earthquake, and Rock Blast at a pretty early stage. So during the storyline, you will pretty much store a lot of cash on those moves, which are pretty strong by default. So
yeah, although if you do want more coverage, you can run things like Fire Punch and Thunder Punch and that sort of thing, but you don't really need to. Am I right on that, Shadow?
Yeah, yeah, completely. Most of the stuff you will hit with fire can be also covered with rock type. Let's say you want to hit a grass type, you can use Rock Blast. The damage will be slightly lower, but not that much, and sometimes it's just enough to defeat the mon you have. You don't really need to spend cash on those moves or just to buy them through. So that's right.
And there is one more thing I would like to talk about. Rock and Ground is not really a great typing, especially when you're going against certain trainers. I'm thinking about Misty and those sort of trainers, and Lorelei from the Elite Four and Kanto. I mean, I don't suggest it. If you want to, you can do it, but I don't suggest it because Lorelei and Misty can have Pokemon that can outspeed Golem. So I just want to let everybody know that Rock and Ground may be a typing that you don't want to have.
You're completely right. Rock Ground makes Golem pretty much vulnerable to water and grass. I mean, the whole concept of Golem isn't to survive those kind of moves, right? But if you lose some HP on the first turn, don't expect to survive 2 Surfs or 2 Giga Drains or something.
Certainly. And that's all we can really say about Golem there. Just be careful when you use Golem. And we do have plenty more Pokemon to cover, but Golem is our very first Pokemon, and I would argue that it's probably one of the easier Pokemon to get in this entire list. You can have that in your bucket list if you'd like that for your story mode. Let's go and dive to the very next story mode Pokemon right now. And it takes form in a fake tree that you have to water, known as Sudowoodo. Alright, so what is our main perk for our lovely fake tree? And that's a good question. Besides being Mirror Bee Shadow Pokemon in Pokemon Coliseum, well, there are a few perks for Sudowoodo. Perk number 1, its attack size base 100. Not as good as Golem, but it still is something. And also its defense stat is 115. And that's really nice considering the fact that you can run counter. Oh, and also, unlike Golem, you get Endeavor. So what that means is that if you are dealing with trainers like Misty and Lorelei, and let's just say they use a special attacking move against you, no problem. You can retaliate and you can do Endeavor, and then Starmie is going to be at 1 HP, and then it's going to be vulnerable to being destroyed by another Pokemon that you have in your party. So that's certainly really nice. And also you have counter at your disposal too, so if Sudowoodo is dealing with things like Machamp, You can use Counter and you can knock out Machamp without worrying about using Endeavor and knocking it all the way down to 1 HP. But I do also want to mention this fact too, that Sudowoodo has access to a fair amount of type coverage. I mean, you have Earthquake, you have Wood Hammer, which has recoil damage, so be careful, don't use that too often. You also have Head Smash, again, recoil damage, be very careful, don't use that too often. Rock Slide, I would opt for because it doesn't have that recoil damage personally, but I know some people that might want that epic, hard-hitting damage, so Head Smash might be for you if you'd like that. Keep that in mind. You also have access to Fire Punch, which is good against targets like Caesar and that sort of thing, so you have that as well. There is one more perk I would like to talk about, and it's the fact that Sudowoodo does need to evolve. You can start straight with Sudowoodo. No need to evolve it at all. Yes, you can breed it to Bonsly, but you need a special item to turn into Bonsly. So when you breed it, and it's an egg, guess what? It hatches a Sudowoodo. No work that you need to do on your end, so that's wonderful. So you are free of an evolution there. But now let's go and talk about its cons. Alright, so con number one is that even though, yes, it is in the mineral-like group, it's not too common in the spawns it's at as time is taping, and it's even a lure in Hoenn and Jagged Pass. So, yeah, I mean, Sudowoodo has some strings attached. At the same time, though, I do recommend Sudowoodo over Golem because it has Endeavor, and that's the main reason why I would suggest that, because you can be able to retaliate against those special attackers. But there's another con as well. It is the fact that Sudowoodo is slower than Golem, which means that Sudowoodo has even more Pokemon to worry about than Golem does. Golem has a base 45 speed stat, which is not that great, but Sudowoodo has a worse speed stat at base 30, so just keep that in mind when you use a Sudowoodo. Also, keep in mind that a fair amount of Sudowoodo's good moves tend to be recoil moves, so just be careful about the times you use those recoil moves. Just keep that in mind when you're building your Sudowoodo. Shadow, do you have any commentary about our lovely fake tree friend?
Well, something I'd like to showcase regarding Sudowoodo in comparison with Golem is the fact that you have Steelfrog learn at a very, very, very early stage on level 9, right? So it's a TM you store and you automatically have. And also the fact you can get a Sucker Punch, which in my opinion is a pretty much interesting move because it allows you to, for example, feint an enemy Pokemon with the start that you said before. But also, if you want to place the rocks and you want to chip some damage on the enemy Pokemon you have in front, because you want to sweep, for example, with a Crocodile to boost the attack or something, it's a pretty much useful move for that as well. But aside of that, yeah, that's pretty much everything you said before.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Sudowoodo was kind of a one-trick tree, but yeah, I was about to say one-trick pony, but I stopped myself. It's not a pony, it's a one-trick tree, so there we go. But we have plenty more Pokemon to dive into, so let's go ahead and dive into our very next Pokemon, shall we? And what is it? It is Forretress. Alright, so what are the main perks for Forretress? Well, considering the fact that it is a bug steel type, it cannot be poisoned. It can be burned though, which is unfortunate. It can be paralyzed, which, I mean, doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things because the speed stat is at a base level 40, so it doesn't really matter if it gets paralyzed. It does matter if it gets burned, because then its attack set gets cut, and also that sturdy does get chipped away, so just keep that in mind. Also, I would like to mention more perks here, and it is the fact that it can learn Stealth Rock, Counter, and Thunder Wave. It doesn't learn Endeavor though, unfortunately, but it does learn Thunder Wave, which is great, because if you want to slow down those fast targets, something like Starmie, for example, I like to use Starmie because there are a fair amount of trainers throughout my story run that use Starmie. Well, then you could be able to use Thunder Wave, you could be able to paralyze those Starmies so they'd be able to hit them really hard with your Pokemon that have a pretty average speed stat, and you can be able to retaliate against that Starmie. That's certainly cool. And also the fact that Forretress has a base 140 defense stat, which is really good, especially when it has moves like Counter, because let's just say that Forretress is facing up against a Pokemon like Machamp, or a Pokemon like Rhydon, for example. you can be able to retaliate. You can hit that Pokemon with counter, and you can be able to knock out that Pokemon. So that's pretty cool, the fact you can knock out that Pokemon with counter. Or let's just say that you're dealing with the Fire-type Gym Leader. No problem, lead with the Forretress, do your Stealth Rock, and then after that, then the Fire-type Pokemon get chip damage because, well, Stealth Rock is on the field. And not only that, but also, since Rock-type moves are super effective against Fire-type Pokemon, well then, that is where Stealth Rock comes in. And that's really cool because, let's just say you're fighting against Blaine, for example, and you're having a bit of some trouble. Well, I think your answer could be a Forretress and then a Sweeper. So, set up your rocks, let Forretress be knocked out, no problem at all. I would like to mention as a perk here for our friend Forretress that Forretress is actually a bug egg group, so it's really easy to catch the breeders and you can breed up the Forretress to your liking, so feel free to use that knowledge however you would like to. And I would like to ask our friend Shadow to give a bit of some commentary about our friend Forretress.
In this case, not much to add. I also like to showcase the fact that Forretress has a very good typing because Backsteel, as you may know, Fire is its only counter, right? It's 4x damage, but it allows you to pretty much survive anything on even 2 hits, which makes counter pretty much ideal because you can counter not once but even twice if, let's say, the enemy spawns to fighting types with close combat. It's pretty much an interesting mon to use to start with.
Certainly. And also, how do you feel about Forretress using Thunder Wave?
It's pretty good in my opinion if you have a booster behind. Let's say you have a Dragon Dose, Gyarados, or something to exploit that Thunder Wave, because if the enemy gets paralyzed and you can boost once, or if he doesn't get paralyzed but he can't retaliate damage, it's pretty much a fast and quick fight for you, so it stores your time and you can go through the storyline way quicker than usual.
Right. Yeah, certainly. Now you might be asking us, hey Roy, you know, I'm looking through Forretress's moveset, and you know, it has the egg move with Power Trick. How come I don't just use Power Trick on my Forretress? And that's a good question, even though yes, it'd be really appetizing to switch that base 90 attack stat and that base 140 defense stat and make it to where Forretress can have a base 140 attack and base 90 defense. Even though that is really tempting to use the move Power Trick. I would like to note that that's a pretty risky maneuver considering the fact that there's a bunch of fast moving parts in the story mode and there's no real time for eloquent play like that. Maybe in PvP that might be good, but in story mode, you want to operate pretty quickly. So I know some people are going to mention that Forretress has the egg move Power Trick. I just want to answer those concerns. Shadow, am I right on that?
Definitely. If you're talking about even PvP, it's not that common, right?
Right.
You won't be using Power 3 like ever, I think. But in PvE, as you rightfully said, you want to go as quicker as possible because you want to wrap the story up as soon as it's possible, right?
Yeah, certainly. So just keep that in mind when you're building the Forretress, that you don't need Power Trick. And not only do you not need Power Trick, but I would highly advise against it. So just keep that in mind. You want to go through the story pretty quickly, as Shadow and I have mentioned. I would also like to note that there may be a few drawbacks as to why you probably might not want to pick Forretress in your story run. And one of the main reasons is that speed stat of base 40 is pretty low considering the fact that there are a fair amount of Pokemon that may be a bit faster than you, and you might need to be wary of when to pull in that Forretress in certain battle situations. Also, I would like to note that Forretress does lack a bit of some move diversification. So, in other words, you can't really use things like U-turn and that sort of thing. You're only really bound to what Forretress can do. And there's also another problem with Forretress as well, and it's the fact that it cannot retaliate against special attackers in the same way that it can retaliate against physical attackers. Yes, you can use Thunder Wave. Yes, you can use Stealth Rock. But I would like to have more options with Forretress. I would love if Forretress can learn Metal Burst or Mirror Code or Endeavor. So hopefully, as Game Freak continues to make more Pokemon games, hopefully they can be able to diversify Forretress's moveset. So that's all I really have to say Forretress's drawbacks. Yeah, now let's go and dive into our very next Pokemon, and it is the form of a Steel Snake. Shadow, are you ready for an epic Steel Snake of the desert?
I can't be ready for that beast, my guy.
Let's go ahead and go to the desert, and let's go and meet up with our friend known as Steelix. All right, there we go. So what are our perks for Steelix? Well, I mean, look at that base attack stat. It is base 85. But no, look at the defense stat. That base is a whopping 200. If only this thing can learn counter, but it can't. But man, what a bummer. I wish this thing can learn counter. It is a mineral egg group, but it means that you can build a rock smash for your breeders and no problem at all. For Steelix, it is such a bummer that it can't learn counter. Man. Alright. Or Metal Burst. It can't learn Metal Burst or counter. That's a darn shame. But you know what? It can learn Stealth Rock. And not only can it learn Stealth Rock, but it can also learn a fair amount of attacking moves too. It can learn Earthquake, it can learn Iron Head, it can learn Crunch. It can learn a bunch of physically attacking moves, so Steelix doesn't have to just be a sitting duck. Or in this case, it doesn't have to be a sitting snake. It can do something. That's pretty awesome. But now let's go and dive into its cons. Here's the old song and dance of the speed stat being pretty low. Base 30. That's the exact same speed stat of Sudowoodo, meaning that you have a lot of targets to worry about in terms of Pokemon being faster than you. I mean, really, Steelix's main priority is to set up the rocks and go, and if it can be able to hit things pretty decently with its attack stat of 85. You know, the base attack stat of 85 is not bad, but that base 200 defense stat is really awesome. So that's what I like about Steelix. And you know what? The only reason why I wouldn't use a Steelix is because Steelix is vulnerable to things like Fake Out and that sort of thing. So when you plan on using a Steelix for the story, just watch out for that. You might say, hey Roy, you know, Fake Out doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things because normal type moves are resisted against Steel type, right? Well, that is a good question, and here's the answer to that question. Yes, but the opponent might do a water type move or something like that and knock out your Steelix. Steelix to me has a lot of positives and a little bit of negatives. Shadow, do you have any commentary for Steelix?
Yeah, like it's pretty strong in comparison of stuff like Golem and such. It has less vulnerabilities, but overall, the fact it can learn Stealth Rock without using a TM yet, right? And it pretty much has access to good physical moves, as you said, like Crunch, I don't know, Stone Edge. Gyro Ball is interesting because Steelix is pretty much slow, so it can deal good damage. Makes it a good choice if you want to run a sturdy move, a sturdy ability, sorry.
I do think Steelix has a bunch of benefits and very little drawbacks, but at the same time, those drawbacks are worth noting if you are going to bring Steelix along for the ride. So just keep that in mind. And without further ado, we're going to go ahead and move on to the fastest sturdy Pokemon as the time of this taping. And you know what it is?
Let me take a guess, Roy. Is it Skarmory?
You are correct! Alright, there we go. Shadow is getting chicken dinner tonight. There we go. Congratulations, Shadow.
I've beaten the game, my guy, Roy. Let's go.
Excellent. Alright, there we go. And for my vegan and vegetarian audience listening, my apologies to you. Alright, so let's go ahead and dive into Skarmory right now. So, what are the main perks? Well, for one thing, you can't bite into it, so there we go. It's a steel type. It's going to be pretty painful, Shadow. I'm sorry to offer you that.
Ain't no problem, Roy. I forgive you.
Alright, that's good. I want you to keep your teeth, you know? You're a good guy. I don't want you to lose your teeth. Alright. So, one of the perks for Skarmory is that Skarmory has an awesome base 140 defense stat, which is really cool considering the fact that Skarmory has access to counter, and it does have access to Stealth Rock. Too bad that it doesn't have access to Endeavor or any other move besides Stealth Rock and counter, but it does have access to things like Drill Peck, and even has access to spikes too, so you can able to set up spikes and Stealth Rock, which is pretty cool in the story run, just kind of setting up stuff, almost like you're doing in PvP, except you're setting it up, and that's really good for Elite Four fights. And also, another main perk for Skarm is that If you don't have any HMs on standby, then no problem. Skarmory can learn Fly, and it can be your flyer in the stories. There you go. You can fly to different locations, while at the same time you have your Spiker, your Stealth Rocker, and your counter Pokemon all right there, all in one wonderfully wrapped bird package right there. Now, you might be saying to me, hey Roy, so what are the drawbacks of Skarm? And that's a good question. Let me go ahead and give you those answers. So, it doesn't have Endeavor, as I mentioned earlier. It doesn't have Mirror Code or anything to take advantage of special attackers against Skarm. So that's really sad. It doesn't have access to Metal Burst or anything like that. But, what it does have access to, a lot of moves that can hit decently well. I'm talking about moves like Iron Head, Drill Peck, Drill Run, those sort of moves. Skarm has pretty decent coverage, and even though, yes, the attack set is base 80, which is slightly lower than Steelix, I mean, I would actually recommend Skarm over Steelix, because Skarm, I would argue, is a lot more useful for its sturdy role than Steelix would be. And Skarm is the fastest sturdy Pokemon in this entire listing as time of this taping. So, Shadow, do you have any feedback about our lovely Steel Pokemon?
In my opinion, I think that among the ones you said we mentioned so far, I think it's one of the most useful as an individual Pokemon, right? As you said, it can get private, so you don't have to worry about carrying them on just for that purpose. But yeah, for PvE terms, the access to counter allows you to eliminate some potential menaces, and it also has double hazard, right? Steel Rock and Spike, so it makes it quite interesting. Let's say Forretress also has spikes and Steel Rock, but yeah, Skarmory being faster and a great typing, right? Steel and Fly makes it a very interesting choice, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I like about Skarm is that it has the best of both worlds. It has a pretty decent defense stat, and also at the same time it has a good attack stat, and at the same time it also has different ways of handling different threats, and that's what I like about Skarm. And
yeah,
it's pretty awesome, isn't that right, Shadow? Or...
yeah, definitely. And also the speed stat is that you highlighted before is pretty interesting for a mon, which is Steel. You know, when you think about Steel users, aside from some exceptional individuals like Cario, Bishop, and such, you tend to think that Steel users are slow, and there you go with a Skarmory. It resists a lot, and it's also fast.
Yeah, certainly. So that's what I like about Skarm, and also added to the fact that Skarm is actually a flying egg root. So what that means for you is that it is actually really simple to get the breeders. And if you would like to see a video on how to get flying breeders, well then I actually have an egg group video that I did with Cole and Kelly, and I discussed a place where to catch your flying egg groups. So feel free to check that out. The only egg move that Skarm has is Pursuit, but you don't really need Pursuit in the story mode. Pursuit's only really good in the PvP scene, so just keep that in mind. And Shadow, I mean, my guess is that you all probably still use Pursuit in PvP, right? Or is that a bit dated?
Yeah.
Still keep it in touch. Still keep it in touch. There we go. So
let's go.
We are done talking about our lovely Steel Bird. But for our next sturdy Pokemon, I would like to talk about a certain worm with a red rock. And what is it? It is Shuckle. Hello, Petrowski. How you doing today? Alright, so what are your main perks and what are your main drawbacks for Shuckle? And that's a good question. I mean, one of the perks is pretty obvious. Base 230 defense stat and base 230 special defense. I mean, that's pretty awesome in itself. And also, when its hidden ability is released, which is contrary, not sturdy, well then, that means you can be able to use something like Shell Smash, you can be able to boost those, but that's a whole nother topic for one day. But I'm not going to even list it in that perk because I don't want to talk about contrary, because this is a sturdy video, not a contrary video. Maybe I can cover contrary in the distant future. But for now, let's go and talk about sturdy. Another perk for Shuckle is the fact that it can learn Stealth Rock, which is pretty cool considering the fact that you go to set up your rocks and you're pretty much guaranteed to have your rocks set up in the story mode. And one of the reasons why that's so good is because Shuckle can take a fair amount of abuse. And I've seen people try to run things like Rest Sleep Talk set with Shuckle. In the story mode, you can use Stealth Rock, you can use Toxic, since it doesn't have access to Thunder Wave. You can use Wrap to kind of trap your opponent, which is pretty cool, especially if you know that your opponent is pretty slow. You can be able to trap your opponent with Wrap, and you can be able to use Toxic, and then Stealth Rock, and you can be able to torture your opponent with the base 230 defense stat and the base 230 special defense stat that you have at your disposal. And there is one other perk as well, and it is the fact that it is the bug egg group. Pretty simple to breed for. You'll be able to have your Shuckle right at your beckoning call. So that's pretty cool. So if you ask me, hey Roy, so I have 230 defense stat and I have 230 special defense. And I could be able to trap my opponent with Wrap, and I could be able to use Toxic and Stealth Rock. Okay, Roy, how come my Shuckle doesn't have an offensive move? And let me go and answer you by asking this question. Why would you want to have an offensive move? And let's go and talk about its drawback. Its attack and special attack is at a pathetic 10. Why do you want to use a physical attack move or a special attacking move if you could be able to use things like Toxic and Stealth Rock and that sort of thing? And you're essentially just a sitting defensive duck. So there we go. In Shuckle's case, you're really kind of a defensive sitting worm. Shuckle in story mode, I mean, it's decent. It's not really something I would suggest. It's something I had in my Johto team back in my playthrough on YouTube, and you could check out my playthrough with Shuckle. But, you know, I don't recommend Shuckle for someone that's just beginning PokeMMO, because Shuckle is kind of hard to maneuver. So make sure you know what you're doing before you use Shuckle. So, Shadow, do you have any feedback about our lovely worm friend in the rock?
Alright, so in this particular case, it's true that Tardy ability won't be that useful as the ones we mentioned before, because of that perk you mentioned before about the defenses. With the defense being that high, you will almost never expect an NPC to one-hit KO you unless your Shuckle is really under level, right? But on the other hand, you can really outstall your opponents with Wrap, Toxic, and even Sandstorm and Rest, as you also mentioned. So yeah, for some purposes, Shuckle can be useful, especially for higher levels like E4 and something.
Yeah, and I would highly suggest that you level up the Shuckle over to the Elite 4 level, because you're probably not going to use it in gym fights, and you're probably not going to use it for any sort of major fights, because it's going to delay your story quite a bit. So make sure you're prepared prior to using Shuckle. And without further ado, let's go and dive into our very next Pokemon, shall we? Which might be nightmare fuel for people that are trying to level up in Mount Silver. Let's go and dive into the biggest elephant in the room, also known as Donphan. Alright, and I would say Donphan is actually a pretty good Pokemon to use in story mode. What are the perks for Donphan? And that's a good question. I mean, when you have a base attack stat of 120, complemented with its base 120 defense stat on top of that, and then base 90 HP, that's really good. That's really good. I mean, you can run that until no tomorrow. I mean, by golly, it is so great. Oh man, I could talk wonderfully about Donphan. But there are also more perks to it as well. You can run things like Earthquake. You can run things like, well, no, Stealth Rock. You can run Counter and Endeavor. That's really cool. But you know what else Donphan has access to via an egg move, and you gotta breed it on first? You know what it is? It is Ice Shard. Alright. And you know what? If you ask me, hey Roy, so what are the easiest Pokemon to obtain that I can breed the Ice Shard egg move onto my Donphan? That's a good question. You can either try to breed a Donphan with a Seal, you can breed it with a Dugong, you can breed it with a Sneasel, Swinub, Piloswine, Weavile, Glaceon, or a Mamoswine. So if you get one of the Pokemon that I mentioned there, you can get Ice Shard on your Donphan. Now, as for the exact semantics as to what you need to do in order to get Seal and everybody to learn Ice Shard, I would highly suggest for you to check out my Egg Move Index Guide, and you can do Control F, or if you're on phone, click on the 3 black dots, then click on Find, and then type in Donphan's name, and then you should be able to have a spoiler drop down for Donphan, and then check Ice Shard for the details. So that's one of the perks for Donphan, is that it can have a pretty OP moveset for the story mode, and it can be able to utilize its sturdy ability, so that's pretty awesome. It has counter, endeavor. In fact, I would argue that it's one of the best Pokemon listed here. So Donphan has a bunch of options. You could run Earthquake, you can run all sorts of stuff that's pretty cool. Donphan also has a fair amount of other perks too. So that's having a really wonderful moveset in Stealth Rock, Counter, Endeavor, and Ice Shard. Another perk for Donphan is that Donphan also has a pretty easy egg group in Field. You can be able to catch any Field Pokemon you want. You can be able to breed that up with Donphan. And yeah, I mean, Field egg group Pokemon are quite common. So you can be able to catch those Pokemon, breed it up with Donphan, and there you go. You're ready to go. So that's pretty cool, Field egg group. And then if you want Ice Shard, make sure the Field Pokemon learns Ice Shard, and then you're good to go. Now, what are the main cons of Donphan? That's a good question. I mean, we have to talk about its speed stat. Yes, it's base 50, and it's actually pretty fast for this entire list. But the problem is that there are a fair amount of opponents that are still faster than you, and you still have to keep that in mind. So you can't really do too much. You just have to do the bare minimum of what you want to do. You want to strategize your fight prior. So let's just say you want to fight against Misty, right? And you are at level 26, right? I mean, Phanpy evolves into Donphan at level 25, so there you go. You just made it to the second gen, and you want to use Donphan, right? Well, Donphan can be able to use Endeavor on turn 1, implying that sees Starmie right there, and then Starmie uses its Water-type move, you use Endeavor, and then you use Ice Shard to finish out Starmie, right? Or you can use Stealth Rock, and then you can be able to let Starmie knock you out, and then you can have your Sweeper take care of Misty, right? While you have the Rocks up. So there are a multitude of ways you can be able to run Donphan, but just keep in mind that your speed stat is pretty low, so you might want to plan ahead of time as to what you're planning to do in the battle. Make sure you do some planning ahead of time as to what strategies to employ in your battles. So that way your Donphan is not a wasted effort, and you can be able to use your Donphan to its maximum potential. Shadow, do you have any commentary about our lovely Donphan?
Not much to be honest. The Donphan is pretty much a strong one for this purpose, and the only small drawback I can say is that you need to breed it in order to give it Ice Shard, as you mentioned. But other than that, it's perfect in the rest of the list. Right? It learns a lot of moves. It strikes hard. It also resists. So yeah, it's pretty impressive.
I'd personally like to get my hands on a Donphan and try to use it in the story mode. So yeah, I look forward to using it once the time arises. But for now, I can't really think about my Donphan because I need to think about this video. Alright folks, we got done chatting about our lovely elephant friend, but now we're going to go ahead and dive into our next Pokemon. Shadow, are you ready to discuss an alligator with steel armor?
It's the first time I heard that! Bro, please go ahead.
Alright, let's go and dive into our lovely alligator warrior right now. Grab your sword and shield, folks, because we're about to talk about Aggron. There we go. And what are the main perks for Aggron? And that's a good question. So our lovely alligator can learn Stealth Rock, Metal Burst, which is pretty awesome, Counter, Endeavor, and Thunder Wave. Now I have a question to ask you. Why do you want to use Counter when you have access to Metal Burst? Because even though, yes, Metal Burst has a 1.5 times increased damage, and Counter has a 2 times damage, I mean, Counter, you still have to play with a bit of prediction, and plus you're wasting a move space. You could be using that move space for a physical move, or you can use it for things like Thunder Wave and that sort of thing. So I don't think you should waste your move space with Counter. I would say pick Middle Burst. So that's one of the perks for our alligator friend. Another main perk is that it's attack stat. I mean, it's awesome. 110. That is pretty high compared to some of our past contenders. It also has a base defense of 180. The exact same defense as Cloyster, by the way. But you know what? It has a steel and rock typing, which makes that defense stat all that more scary. So there we go. So alligator with steel armor. There we go. For any Floridians listening, I'm sorry to put that in your mind. Alright, so another main benefit for our lovely alligator is that Aggron has a fair amount of type coverage. I mean, it can learn things like Fire Punch, it can learn Thunder Punch, it can learn Head Smash, although that lets just Rock Slide so that you don't have that recoil damage, because you're not going to have Rock Head, you're going to have Sturdy. Because Sturdy is much better for Aggron and Story Mode, in my opinion. And you can build run Brick Break or Rock Slide or whatever move you want. Aggron has a fair amount of coverage here, so that is the perk for our lovely Steel type alligator. And also, I'd like to note that it is a monster egg group as well, so it might be a little bit of effort finding the breeders, but no problem. You can go and check out my egg group video that I did with Cole and Kelly, which I can link down in the description below. And you can go ahead and check out that monster group. In fact, I think I featured it first in the video, so feel free to check that out.
There is one more perk that I would like to squeeze in here, and it's the fact that Aggron is indeed a steel type. So what that means is that Aggron is immune to being poisoned. So there you go, further protection for that sturdy ability there.
Here are the cons for Aggron. Well, if you want Head Smash, which I don't suggest because you're not running Rock Head, but let's just say you did want Head Smash. Well, my friend, Head Smash is an egg move, unfortunately, and you're going to have to learn that by a Cranidos or a Rampardos, or you're going to have to figure out a way how to get Nidoking to learn it. So, there you go. Then you got to breed Nidoking with Aggron. Those are the old dark days before Rampardos was implemented on PokeMMO. Man, dark times. But now we have Rampardos, so that makes our job a little easier because we're putting Head Smash. But you don't want Head Smash on Aggron, so that is an irrelevant con, but I'm going to list it anyway just in case people want that Head Smash move. Another main con for Aggron is that it is 4 times weak to fighting and ground. So that makes it pretty bad in the type department. Yes, it is immune to being poisoned, but at the same time, you can be hit by Earthquake. You can be hit by things like Cross Chop or a hard-hitting fighting type move like Superpower or Close Combat. Aggron is not going to enjoy it. Yes, Sturdy is going to help out, and you can only really do Metal Burst once. At the same time, you really have to know what you're doing if you're going to use Aggron. Aggron's a cool tool, but you got to know what you're doing. Shadow, would you like to make some commentary about our rock-type alligator friend that is currently wearing some steel clothing?
Well, the fact that this is a big steel alligator, as you said, also means that it can hit kind of hard with Heavy Slam, so, and since it's steel, it will deal a lot of damage. But I also like to say the fact that Metal Burst also applies to special attacks, so unlike Counter, you can retaliate from a Flamethrower or some special attacking move, so it's a very interesting choice for Aggron to wipe one of their Pokemon down.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I like about Aggron is that it has access to Metal Burst, and also at the same time, it also has access to Stealth Rocket. You get a fair amount of good sturdy type moves, but the thing I like about Metal Burst is that you can be able to hit both sides of the spectrum. You go to hit, if Starmie has Surf, no problem, you can use Metal Burst. If the champ uses Cross Chop, no problem, you can still use Metal Burst and knock out the champ. So there's no real thinking that needs to take place in terms of saying, hey, Starmie is a special attacker. Hey, Machamp is a special attacker. No, you can just hit things with Metal Burst, so that's pretty cool. So
Indeed.
But there is another con as well, and that'd be the fact that what happens if you're dealing with an opponent that also has Sturdy? This is the part where Aggron starts crying, because it doesn't have a priority move. So let's just say that you have Metal Burst and you knock your opponent down to 1 HP. You can't retaliate. You can't use a priority move, meaning that Aggron's going to be knocked out. It's going to be a one-hit wonder, right? It's going to just use Metal Burst and it's going to go out with glory. But if it can't, well then, what is your Pokemon going to do? What is the next Pokemon going to do? And also add to the fact that if you're dealing with an Elite Four fight, and I'm thinking particularly of Bruno with his Steelix, with the ability Sturdy, I'm thinking about that exact Bruno. I'm thinking about his Kanto Elite Four fight. And I'm also thinking about him in his Johto Elite Four fight. When you use Aggron against a Steelix, Steelix has Sturdy, and then Bruno, just to add to your pain, he's gonna heal it up with full restore. So that's pretty brutal, and I don't suggest using Aggron on targets that have the ability Sturdy. Shadow, do you have any feedback about the fact that Aggron lacks a priority move?
Yeah, as you said, if you don't have rock setup and let's say the NPC has Pokemon which has Focus Sash, it will resist the Metal Burst. Even if you have it, or if you don't, it doesn't really mind, and you won't be able to knock it out. So yeah, that's pretty much an issue in some scenarios. You know, and a Steel Indicator can't be fully perfect, so it is what it is.
Aggron is one of the best in my opinion, so yeah, you could probably use either Aggron or Donphan in terms of the sturdy, but personally, if you're a beginner, I would suggest the Skarmory, but you know what, Aggron and Donphan are certainly worthy contenders.
Now I would like to mention one more drawback, and it's the fact that Aggron has a base 50 speed, and even though yes, base 50 speed is pretty fast in this list because sturdy Pokemon are known to be pretty slow, I mean, base 50 speed is still not really that great, and you still have to watch out for certain threats. So if you are going to go on the offensive and you're not going to be using things like Metal Burst or anything like that, then you want to be very careful about how you use the Aggron.
So now we're going to go ahead and dive into a Pokemon that has sturdy, but the sturdy is actually a hidden ability, hence the reason why this Pokemon is holding a diamond in his hand. And what is it? It is Relicanth. Alright, so what are the main perks for Relicanth? And that's a good question. Its physical attack is not bad. I mean, it's base 90. And you can be able to hit things pretty hard with Waterfall. You can be able to hit things with Rock Slide and the like. Hey, you also have access to Stealth Rock, which is pretty cool. And also another perk for Relicanth is, look at that base defense stat. It is base 130. You'll be able to take certain hits pretty well. In my opinion, I think Relicanth is a cool tool. So feel free to use Relicanth. And also, the egg group is Water A and Water B. Its egg groups might not be the easiest groups in the world to hunt for, but at the same time though, it is manageable considering the fact that there are a fair amount of Water A breeders out there on PokeMMO, so you can probably breed Relicanth relatively easily. Now let's go and dive into one of its cons. There we go. Die. Relicanth. Okay, alright. So one of the cons that I'd like to talk about is the fact that Relicanth has a base 55 speed stat, even though that's actually pretty decent. At the same time, there are opponents that are a lot faster than you, so you gotta brace for that. And also, come on, Relicanth doesn't have counter, it doesn't have Metal Burst, it doesn't have Mirror Coat. No, it only has Stealth Rock. We can only hope. Alright, and another main con for Relicanth is the fact that sturdy is a hidden ability, meaning that's going to be very hard to obtain. So that is another con as well. So I don't recommend Relicanth because of the difficulty of getting it, and even if you do get it, I don't think it's really worth your time. Shadow, what's your take on sturdy Relicanth?
Yeah, probably one of the fewest stuff we can say about it is that it has access to strong water and rock stab moves, right? Like Waterfall and Head Smash. But other than that, it doesn't really have any advantage over any of the monsters we will list so far. So yeah, it's not like a big deal to get, like not something you should aim to get if you want to rush the storyline with Starby.
If you are going to use a hidden ability Relicanth in your story mode, just keep in mind that Relicanth can only really use Stealth Rock. So make sure you keep that in mind before building your hidden ability Sturdy Relicanth. Alright, so we got another hidden ability. Let's go and dive into our very next hidden ability, and this is going to make history as the very first legendary Pokemon that's currently not implemented yet on PokeMMO that's going to be featured here on the Roy Rogers News channel in the ability video series. And what is it, you might ask? And that's a good question. It is Regirock. Now you might be saying to me, Regirock graphic looks a little different. How come? And that's a good question. That's because at the time of this taping, Regirock is currently not implemented on PokeMMO yet. So I took a screenshot of my Pokedex base stat total, so that way you can be able to know what you're dealing with. So what are the main perks for Regirock? Well, it has the exact same defense stat as Steelix, a base defense stat of 200, which is pretty awesome. And also, unlike Steelix, it has a base attack stat of 100. which is actually pretty decent. And also, I would like to note that the HP is 80, which is pretty nice. You can be able to build it offensively, or you can build it defensively, and you can still have some room to navigate your Regirock to do whatever you want it to do. Another main perk is that Regirock also has a base 100 special defense, which is really cool. Usually Pokemon in these listings have pretty poor special defense stat, but not Regirock. Regirock has a pretty awesome special defense out of base 100. There's some more perks as well for our lovely friend Regirock, just in case there's not enough. So Regirock can use Stealth Rock, Counter, and Thunder Wave. And you have to saying to me, hey Royce, what are the main drawbacks to Regirock? And here's your answer. So Regirock cannot use Endeavor. It cannot use Mirror Coat or Metal Burst. It cannot use any other move to counteract the special attacker Pokemon. Regirock is essentially a sitting duck when it deals with things like Starmie. Yes, it can use things like Stealth Rock and the like, but Regirock is really limited as to what it can do in terms of its sturdy ability. Yes, you could have it learn Thunder Punch, but at the same time, can't you have better Pokemon to use Thunder Punch with? I mean, yes, Regirock has a base 100 attack stat, but, you know, I can just have a Mold Breaker Excadrill with X Repel, and I can use X Scissor on that Starmie, and I can knock out Starmie. So, that's what I'm trying to say here, is that Regirock, there's essentially a Pokemon that can do things better than Regirock can in terms of the physical attacking department. So that's one of its main drawbacks. Another drawback for Regirock is that it is a legendary, so it's a little harder to get. And also the fact that it's a hidden ability legendary. So that's probably going to be really hard to get too. So I don't think the Pokemon developers are going to let you get a sturdy Regirock so easily. Shadow, do you have any feedback about our lovely walking rock friend?
You highlighted something which is interesting, right? Like the fact that among Shuckle, it's the only mode which has a good amount of special defense as well, makes it kind of ideal to deal with 2, even 3 hits if you under certain situations, right? So, and also since it hits pretty hard, it's a good choice, but yeah, the fact that it's a legendary won't make it the best choice, especially for someone who is beginning or who doesn't want to spend cash or time looking for a legendary.
Right, yeah, certainly. I mean, I agree with you, Shadow. I think that if you're going to use Regirock, I would not suggest for you to use it in the story mode because there are much better Pokemon that can take its place, in my opinion. I'm sorry to any of the Regirock fans, I'm sorry. But there are much better Pokemon out there. And even though, yes, the Pokemon developers are probably going to make Regirock level 50 if it is implemented. I mean, at the same time, use better Pokemon. I mean, Donphan and Aggron, I would probably say, are much better than Regirock in my opinion. So, without further ado, let's go and dive into our very next Pokemon. Shadow, are you ready?
No, to be honest. I don't know which one is coming.
There we go. Shadow with the jokes. I like it. Alright, so our next Pokemon is going to be a certain Stone Wall Pokemon. And you know what it is?
Alright, yeah, now I do. Bastiodon?
Perfect. Alright. Now, what are the main perks for Bastiodon? Well, do you remember how we were praising Regirock's special defense? Yeah, but Bastiodon essentially puts that special defense to shame. Base 138 special defense. And base 168 defense. You know what else, Shadow?
No! It's still Rock!
Yes, and...
I'm nervous.
Metal Burst!
Oh!
Yeah! There you go. Metal Burst, you don't need counter. You can learn counter, but...
This is a good guy. I like it.
Stealth Rock and Metal Burst. Bam! There you go. You hit pretty hard with that Bastiodon. All right. Well, in terms of the sturdy stuff, you hit pretty hard, not in terms of the offensive prowess. So that's going to be one of its drawbacks there. Hold that thought for a moment. I also want to talk about another perk as well. Its egg group is Monster, so it's actually really easy to breed for because, as I mentioned with Cole and Kelly, you could be able to catch a certain Pokemon, and then you can be able to breed it up. I'm not going to tell you what the Pokemon is because I want you to watch the egg group video.
And also would like to mention another perk for Bastiodon, and it's the fact that Bastiodon is also a steel type. So what that means is that Bastiodon is immune to being poisoned, and that can be able to help in terms of keeping your sturdy ability alive and well.
Let's go talk about its drawbacks. And man, oh man, that attack stat is terrible. 52. And you know what's worse? Special attack 47. And you're looking at Bastiodon's moves, and you would think, hey, you know, I want to learn things like Thunderbolt. I would love to learn things like Rock Slide. Man, wouldn't that be great? No, 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 no. Don't do that. You're going to waste Bastiodon's potential. I mean, that is a pretty low stat you're dealing with. You know what you can run on Bastiodon? I think you can run moves like Foul Play, because there'll be certain Pokemon with high physical attack stat. And I'm thinking about play with his Excadrill, and you can be able to use Foul Play against Excadrill. You can be able to try to knock out Excadrill that way. So, yeah, that's one of its main things you can do. You can also run Metal Sound that can lower down the special defense. Try to opt for moves that can work in Bastiodon's best interests. Shadow, do you have any commentary to say about our lovely wall with feet?
Well, my guy, Bastiodon, yeah, as you said, please do not teach Flamethrower or Thunderbolt and such, but especially I want to say that Bastiodon is like a bulkier version of Aggron, right? They share typing, and the purpose is pretty much the same, but since Bastiodon has a pretty big special defense among the defense stats, it's a pretty nice user to use Metal Burst. It's possible that Bastiodon resists like more than one hit with Metal Burst, so it allows you to feint more than one Pokemon in certain scenarios. It makes it kinda cool.
Yeah, before I move on, Shadow, do you have any more commentary about our lovely wall?
Not really, that's pretty much everything. Like, if you want to use a more defensive version of a Steel Rock move, a Steel Rock type, use this one. If you want something to hit hard without Metal Burst, you can just use Aggron instead.
Yeah, certainly. So Bastiodon and Aggron can really complement each other, but I would personally recommend Bastiodon over Aggron, because Bastiodon has much more defense and special defense. When you use an ability like Sturdy, I mean, you really want as much defense as you can and special defense as you can, so you can be able to utilize the Metal Burst move, and you can be able to use Stealth Rock, and you'll be able to have time to do different maneuvers, so you can be able to try to do that.
Here comes the old song and dance about Bastiodon lacking a priority move. And why is that such a problem? Well, let's just say that you use Metal Burst against your opponent, and let's just say that your opponent just so happens to also have the ability Sturdy, or your opponent has the Focus Sash that the Pokemon is holding on to. Well, here's why that's such a problem. Because during the next turn, your opponent can then wipe away your efforts by using the full restore on the next turn, while Bastiodon is just sitting duck. And you can probably use Stealth Rock while your opponent is using the full restore, so you can do that at least. But that is a wasted turn in my opinion. I think that Bastiodon needs a priority move just like Aggron. So Aggron and Bastiodon are kind of in the same camp here, and hopefully Game Freak is a bit nicer to Bastiodon and Aggron, and they could be handed a priority move.
Without further ado, let's go and dive into our very next Pokemon right now. And, oh, I think someone's trying to get into the studio. Alrighty, folks, I'm here in the Roy Rogers Studios, and I'm gonna sell all sorts of things. I sold pearl rings, I sold a daycare service. In fact, I even sold a certain hot air balloon elimination service to eliminate Gartrina. Alright, there we go. And you know what? I sold a bunch of things as well. A bunch of used bikes, and, well, let's go ahead and talk to security guard. Hi there, security. I'm gonna be in my next video here. What are you talking about? This way leads to Mount Silver. You'll see very scary, strong Pokemon out there. You're not ready for it. What are you talking about, not ready for it? I defeated Gartrina. Do you not hear me? I defeated Gartrina. Oh, look, there's someone out there. He's probably having a cigarette break. Hey, Mr. Shadow Guy, can you let me in? Tell this security guy that I'm legit, please. I'm a cast member. I sold what? I'm not gonna get out. What are you talking about? No, I need to sell something. Please, Mr. Shadow, hear me. Hear me, Shadow.
Last warning, get out of here.
No! What are you talking about? I defeated Garatrina. Don't you hear me good? Or are those bells blocking those ears? What?
You don't want this.
All right. Well, very well then. That extra drill's kind of scaring me. But what are you doing? What? Oh.
Get out of here already, my guy!
That was a close call. Whew. Oh, that was a real scary call, man. Real scary. But you all saw that, though. But you know what? I guess I'm going to have to announce my retirement. You know, there's only one way to get me out of retirement. Can you guys please comment on the Roy Rogers News channel if you want to see me be reintroduced? I really miss being on there. Please comment. Otherwise, I'll be chased out by some security and by that really menacing guy with the cigarette in his hand. Never mind. He's a retired star. Alright. Magnezone! There we go! Alright, so what are the main perks for our lovely Magnezone? Sorry, retired star. I had you on during the competitive analysis, and now you're officially retired. Alright, there we go. He tried to get into the building, but I made sure there was security to prevent him from getting in. Alright, so there we go. So what are the main benefits to our lovely Magnezone? Magnezone has access to Mirror Coat and Thunder Wave, which is actually pretty cool considering the fact that you can be able to retaliate against special attackers, and you can be able to paralyze fast Pokemon, right? You can also be able to use your base 130 special attack, which is pretty cool. And also you have a pretty decent base 90 special defense, and you have a base 115 defense stat, which is actually pretty cool. And also, it is a genderless Pokemon, meaning that you have to breed it with each other, but no problem at all. You can be able to breed that Magnezone to your liking. They might be saying to me, hey Roy, so what are the main cons to Magnezone? And that's a good question, and here are the answers. Answer number one is that Magnezone is really weak to ground type, and it has no way of retaliation, which is really sad, because Magnezone, if it only had Metal Burst, or if it had Counter or something like that, then Magnezone can be able to have a way to defeat the hard-hitting ground type Pokemon, but no, it doesn't have Counter, and it only has Mirror Coat, so there we go. At least you can use whatever you have. You don't even have Endeavor either, so Magnezone, I'm sad for you, buddy. There is one more perk I want to mention. It's the fact that Magnezone cannot be poisoned since it is a steel type, so Magnezone, keep doing you. And also, let's go back to those cons, shall we? Look at that speed stat. It is base 60. Yes, it is a decent speed stat, but it is still pretty slow compared to a fair amount of Pokemon, meaning that the likelihood of you being outsped is actually pretty high. So make sure you keep that in mind and make sure you go in to the battles with strategy. Shadow, do you have any feedback about Magnezone?
No, this Magnezone doesn't have access to Steel Rock, so if we want to rush a high level NPC like a new Forretress could potentially have some focus as Monk, we should really get someone with Steel Rock among Magnezone, but since it's a pretty cool moon to hit through special because it has a good special attack stat and good stat moves like Thunderbolt and Flash Cannon, it can be a good option towards certain mons like any ground mon which could be dangerous or something, and Magnezone could still stand strong against them.
Meanwhile, your arch nemesis Chansey and Blissey are laughing right now behind the scenes. I just want you to know that.
I don't want to hear about Chansey ever again, I swear.
Magnezone is crying in fear right now. I think the special attack is pretty cool, and also you can run Hidden Power Fire, and it's able to do your coverage and stuff. I gotta say, you need to know what you're doing prior to using Magnezone. I don't suggest it for anyone just starting the story mode. Only run Magnezone if you can maneuver really well. So just keep that in mind. Oh, and I should also mention the fact that it can't learn Stealth Rock. So yeah, that's another drawback. Sturdy and no Stealth Rock. Would you believe that, Shadow?
I didn't think Magnezone was that mid-tier, honestly. Damn it. Come on.
Yeah, certainly. Magnezone, I'm sorry. You're pretty low in the usage in terms of the story mode. Oh yeah, also you have a pretty funny way of evolving. You gotta level up in a magnetic field. So that's pretty discouraging for any Magnezone owners. So you gotta lug your Magneton all the way to either Power Plant and Kanto, which is much later in the story because you gotta use Surf, or you gotta lug it all the way to the new Mawile over in Hoenn, or you gotta lug it over to Mount Coronet in Sinnoh, or you gotta lug it all the way to Chargestone Cave in Unova, or you gotta lug it over to the Team Rocket headquarters over in Johto. So, I think I named all the electronic bases where you have to lug Magneton to evolve into Magnezone. So, the evolution itself is pretty over the top. So, yeah, I don't suggest using Magnezone because of all the moving parts that have to work properly. Oh yeah, did I mention the fact that Magneton can't learn Mirror Coat and only Magnezone can? I thought I should note that. For anyone that wants to use Eviolite Magneton in your story mode, don't use Magnezone if you're going to use Mirror Coat. So, I just thought I should note that. Yeah, Shadow, I'm sorry to kind of rag on about Magnezone, but I gotta say the truth, man.
I mean, just like Dalmar kinda would say in Fortune Fire, hey bro, you didn't make the cat, please leave the forge, right? This is pretty much Magnezone right now.
Oh man, wow. Alright, let's go and move on because I can't stand hearing about a certain UFO thing crying. So let's go ahead and talk about our next Pokemon. A certain Pokemon with a big, gigantic nose. Probopass! Alright, there we go. So besides it having stylish face hair, what is its main perk? And that's a good question. Probopass has access to Stealth Rock and Thunder Wave. So at least it has Stealth Rock. That's pretty cool. And also, Probopass has a pretty good special defense stat at base 150, and it's a pretty good defense stat at base 145. So that's pretty nice, and also it's egg group mineral, so you can build a rock smash for your breeders. And also, another main perk for Probopass as well is that it is a steel type, so it is able to be immune to toxic damage. So that's pretty awesome. But we gotta talk about Probopass's cons now. And you know what? Probopass can't learn Counter, it can't learn Endeavor, and it can't learn Mirror Coat. Alright, and there's going to be another con to our Probopass. So the con that I would like to state here is that just like Magnezone, Probopass has a pretty funny way of evolving. It is the exact same way how you evolve Magneton into Magnezone. You have to level a nose pass inside a magnetic area. So just to repeat what I said in the Magnezone section of this video, you need to go over to either the Power Plant in Kanto, or you need to go over to the new Mauville in Hoenn, or you need to go over to Mount Coronet in Sinnoh, or you need to go over to Chargestone Cave in Unova, or you need to go over to the Team Rocket headquarters in Johto. So much potential. Shadow, do you have any feedback about our big-nosed friend here?
Well, it's pretty much like Aggron and Bastiodon, but in this case, we could say that it has some coverage from the special side, like especially Power Gem. Like, it's pretty much the main usage over the other two. It doesn't also have access to Metal Burst, right? So that's such a waste for such a beautiful mon with such nose, right?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you gotta treat a Pokemon with a good mustache well, you know? You know, before I start hearing about Probopass crying and ruining its mustache, let's go and dive into our next Pokemon, shall we? So you know what our next Pokemon is? It is going to be a certain rock. And you know what it is? It is the Golem counterpart of Unova. You know what it is?
It has to be Gigalith, right?
You are correct. All right, there we go.
Woohoo!
So what are the main perks? Now you sound like Mario from Super Nintendo. All right, so what are your main perks there, Mr. Gigalith? And let's go ahead and dive into them, shall we? So Gigalith has a really awesome attack stat of base 135, and also it has an awesome defense stat of base 130, and also it has a base 80 special defense, which is really cool. And also, it's a mineral egg group, so it's really easy to get breeders for. I gotta do the same old song and dance in terms of the cons. You know, its speed stat is 25. I gotta say, it's even worse than Golem. Golem is 45, and Gigalith is base speed 25. That's bad. Also, it has to evolve by a trait, so when your Regirock evolves into Boldore, you have to keep it below that obedience cap so you can flag either myself, Shadow, or Moderator to evolve your Boldore, right? It is too much to really bear, by golly. Evolving Boldore into Gigalith.
What can we say about Gigalith? I mean, it's good mount. It hits nicely from the physical side, right? Because, as you said, base 135, which is pretty strong. It pretty much guarantees 2 hit KO, or even 1 hit KO if you use moves like Explosion or a good hit from Stone Edge. But I don't think I prefer it over Golem, but I mean it's a matter of personal preference. The function is pretty much the same, right? So.
Right, but there is another con. Shadow, you know what it is?
No Metal Burst, bro!
You are right. No Metal Burst, no counter, no Mirror Coat, nothing. Just Stealth Rock.
Nothing. Come on, Gigalith.
Not even Thunder Wave. Just Stealth Rock. That's it. That is all. It's just like that Willy Wonka beat. You're getting nothing! Nothing, nothing, nothing! Yeah, so congratulations, you get Stealth Rock, and that's it. So that's all Gigalith is really there for, just like Steelix, essentially. Steelix and Gigalith should really talk it up. I mean, by golly, both of them are struggling with the exact same problem. The only difference is that Steelix at least has the Steel type, unlike Gigalith, which can be poisoned. So there we go. So Gigalith is not really in a good position to be used in the story mode, in my opinion. So you might want to opt for another sturdy Pokemon. So, Shadow, what do you have to say about Gigalith? Did we cover a lot of our bases?
Poor guy. I guess he didn't go to school enough to learn such useful moves, right? It's a waste of just like probopass. What a pity.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, what a pity. You know what? Let's go and dive into our next Pokemon, shall we? And look, there's a recurring star from our Mold Breaker series. Hello there, Sawk! There we go, and this time Sturdy is not a hidden ability. So what is our main benefit for Sawk? And that's a good question. Well, let's go and start off with the fact that it has a base 125 attack stat, which is actually pretty good in terms of retaliating in the story mode. And also has a base 85 speed stat, which is also pretty good. Base 75 defense and special defense, and base 75 HP, which is also good as well. Besides Sawk having all that, there's one more perk I gotta note here. It has counter, so that's pretty good. And also the fact that it has the elemental punches, so Thunder Punch, Fire Punch, Ice Punch, and it has pretty good move diversification in terms of attacking. Now let's go talk about its drawbacks. You know, you only have counter. You have nothing. Just like the Willy Wonka beat. You have nothing! Nothing, nothing, nothing! There we go. There we go. So that's Sawk right there. You counter. That's all you're getting. Counter. That's it. Another main con for Sawk is that it is a male-only breed. It is humanoid, but you know, you gotta breed it with Ditto, and you know, as I mentioned in my Mold Breaker videos, it's sort of like you're going to the breeding casino, and you're kind of hoping you're getting good IV'd Sawk. So that's probably why I'm using the exact same graphic for Sawk as I used in the Mold Breaker video, because it is like a breeding casino essentially. So just keep that in mind. Male-only Pokemon, not really a big fan. Shadow, do you have any feedback about our fighting Pokemon?
Well, my friend Sawk pretty much sucks. Nah, but being serious, it's I think its main usage is probably like a revenge killer, right? Because you are warranted to survive one hit, and due to the access to elemental punches, a good move pool on the attacking side, as you mentioned. It under certain conditions, it allows you to revenge kill something which could be dangerous potentially, right?
I do think there are much better options than Sawk, but we wanted to mention Sawk because Sawk does have the ability Sturdy, and I know some people are probably going to ask about Sawk, so that's why we're mentioning Sawk right here. Shadow, are you ready to move on to the next Sturdy Pokemon? Because, quite frankly, I don't really want to hang around a casino for too long.
Let's go ahead, Roy. We have to, for the people.
I agree. Alright, let's go and dive into another Pokemon, shall we? And this Pokemon should look familiar because I talked about it with Cole and Kelly in the breeding video. You know what it is? It is Crustle! Alright, there we go. So what are the main perks for Crustle? I mean, look at that base attack stat. It is an awesome 105. And also that defense stat is 125, and its special defense is a decent 75. And also the HP is base 70. And you know what? Its egg group is really easy to hunt for. I mean, by golly, you probably watch the egg group location video and you probably get an idea of where to rock smash for, right? You can get 100% Crustle. So hopefully that video helps you out in terms of trying to find out where Crustle is. But you know what? There are other perks as well for our lovely friend Crustle. You know what it is? It is the fact that Crustle has access to Stealth Rock and Counter. That seems to be a thing that Unova Pokemon need to learn. They really need more moves to have access to. But for some reason, Game Freak just didn't give enough love to Unova Pokemon. I don't know why, but you know. But it is what it is. Stealth Rock and Counter. Now let's go talk about its cons, shall we? Well, if Crustle is dealing with the special attacker, you know what? You might as well just throw your hands up because you're probably not going to do anything to that special attacker. I mean, in terms of retaliating back with like a Mirror Coat or Endeavor, you're not doing anything. I mean, yes, if your special attacker is Starmie, you can retaliate with X-Scissor, but again, you really want to lean on other Pokemon to do the retaliation. You just do the Stealth Rock. At least Crustle has access to Counter, but I think that the problem with Crustle is that there's just so many Pokemon that can do its job much better. So just keep that in mind before you build a Crustle. Shadow, do you have any feedback about our friend with the crust on its back?
Something we could highlight compared to the others is the fact that it's a bug and rock like Shuckle, and that makes it a good type to survive most of the attacks which could be received from NPCs. But other than that, the attack is interesting, the bug stuff is also interesting towards some things like grass or dark types. But yeah, it's pretty decent setter and pretty decent starter usually.
I do think that Crustle is decent. I just can't really justify people using it per se, but you know what? I would probably say that Crustle is not a bad option. However, I'm going to give a ranking at the end of the video as to my personal top 3 sturdy Pokemon listing to use for the story mode. But for now, we're going to go and move on from our crust friend, and we're going to go over to another fossil. By golly, 2 fossils in one video. Alright, our next Pokemon is going to be Carracosta. Alright, so what are the main perks for Carracosta? And let's go and start off with that awesome base attack stat of base 108. And also you have a base special attack of 83, which is not bad, but I would lean a little bit more into its attack stat of base 108. I mean, you have Waterfall and you have Rock Slide and all those wonderful moves. And also another main perk for Carracosta is that it has a defense stat of 133, which is actually pretty good. And also a base special defense stat of 65, which is also excellent as well. And also, I should note that Carracosta does have Stealth Rock, which is good. Carracosta essentially does its job pretty well. And plus, I would like to note that Carracosta does have the move Aqua Jet, meaning that, let's just say you want to do lasting damage on a certain Pokemon, right? Let's just say you're on the way out, and let's just say there's a Pokemon you're dealing with that has the ability Sturdy. Well then, you can use Aqua Jet before Carracosta gets knocked out, and then when Carracosta does get knocked out, then you're able to pull in your Sweeper, and your Sweeper will be able to knock out the Sturdy Pokemon. So Carracosta is essentially a well-rounded Pokemon in my opinion. So you might be asking me, hey Royce, what are the main cons to Carracosta? And that's a good question. And it's the old song and dance with the low speed stat of 32. You don't really want a base 32 speed stat when you're using an attacker all the way. So Carracosta is not a sweeper, but it basically does its job and then some, but it doesn't really do any more than that, right? It doesn't have counter, it doesn't have metal burst, it doesn't have mirror coat. It does the bare essentials in terms of doing stealth rock and aqua jet on top of that. So Shadow, do you have any feedback about our fossilized turtle?
Carracosta is basically like an alternative version of Relicanth, which we mentioned before, but with probably the difference that it has Aqua Jet, which is pretty useful to hit 1 HP Pokemon, etc., and it's a stab, so it deals more damage. But overall, yeah, it's pretty much like an enhanced version of Relicanth, in my opinion.
I would like to mention the fact that if you're interested, Carracosta does have an egg move of Flail, so if you want to utilize that sturdy stat even further, you can at least do Flail, but it doesn't replace counter or mirror coat or metal burst. But hey, at least Flail is an option, and you have a base 108 attack stat, so you could utilize Flail if you really want to use Carracosta. And if you want to see a basic list of what Pokemon you can breed with Carracosta to learn Flail, well, I'm going to go ahead and link the
Egg move guide
in the description below, because there are way too many Pokemon to list here. So feel free to do either the Control F and search for Carracosta's name, or you can search for the Carracosta by clicking on the 3 dots at the top right of your phone, and then click on Find in Page, and then click on that, and then type in Carracosta, and you should be able to get Carracosta, and you can scroll down and see how you want to breed on Flail. But either way, I mean, that is an option at least. So Shadow, what's your feedback about this?
I couldn't personally replace Counter with Flail, but it's true that you don't rely on the enemy hitting you with a physical move, so it can be a good choice.
And also, using berries is not economically wise. So I know some people
Exactly.
I know some people are going to say, hey Roy, why not just attach a lychee berry to the Carracosta? Okay, you could probably do that in PvP, but you can't do that in PvE, because that's not economically savvy, in my opinion. I think that you should use an item that doesn't have to be replenished every so often. And you can use Flail, and as Shadow mentioned, there's no real way to replace counter with Flail.
I would also like to note that Carracosta is both Water A and Water C, so since Carracosta, one of the egg groups is Water A, it should be easier to find breeders, considering the fact that Water A is probably one of the most shared breeding groups on PokeMMO, so feel free to get some breeders for Carracosta, and if you want the cheap option, you can go ahead and try to opt for those Water A breeders for Carracosta. Water C is going to be a little bit more expensive, but if you need Water C for an egg move, at least you know that that's an option.
I would just say look for better options in terms of if you want to use a sturdy mon in your story mode. So just keep that in mind. And now, Shadow, it is time for us to go to the awards. Shadow, are you ready for the honors?
Oh no, I have to bring some cash to give to Pokemon.
Excellent.
To reward them though.
Nice. All right. Without further ado, let's go and dive into the Golden Globes of Sturdy right now. The Golden Globes that you actually want to watch, not the Golden Globes that's been airing for quite a bit, because I can care less about the current Golden Globes. But the PokeMMO Sturdy Golden Globes. Let's go ahead and dive into that right now. So let's go and look into the ratings, and let's see which Pokemon I rate as number 1. So the Pokemon I rate as number 1, drum roll please. Alright, the number 1 Pokemon is... Alright, let me grab my card here. Bastiodon, because Bastiodon has Metal Burst. It has that really nice defense stat, And you know what? Even with the lack of physical moves and all that, I can be able to sleep comfortably knowing the fact that Bastiodon can take a fair amount of abuse. So I love that about Bastiodon. Bastiodon can really be in the field for quite a while. So that's what I love about Bastiodon. And the runner-up is Aggron, because Aggron is similar to Bastiodon, except it doesn't really have that flashy of a special defense stat, but it does have a good defense stat at 180, and it has a decent special defense at base 60. So Aggron is decent, and it does have moves to retaliate, and it has an attack stat to back it up. So that's good. So number 2 is Aggron. But then, number 3. You know what number 3 is, Mr. Shadow?
I have no idea.
It comes in the form of, we might need a large studio because an elephant is about to arrive.
Let's go! Seth will be proud though.
Donphan! There we go. Number 3 is Donphan. There we go. Because of the fact that it can do Stealth Rock counter, Endeavor, and Ice Shard by an egg move. So there you go. So not only can you do Endeavor, but you can also do that Ice Shard to kind of finish off that 1 HP. So Donphan essentially does its own cleanup work. It's awesome, man. I love it. So, man, Shadow, do you have any feedback about our ratings?
Honestly, pretty accurate in my opinion. Maybe I would consider putting Skarmory instead of Aggron in that position, but just because we will have 3 different profiles, right, of monsters you could potentially use, but overall, I pretty much agree.
You know what? We're going to do an honorable mentions. There we go. Are you ready for an honorable mentions?
Please, go ahead.
All right. Starting us off is Skarmory. There we go. Skarmory is an honorable mention. The reason why I didn't really want to put Skarmory on the podium there was because Skarmory doesn't really have Endeavor. It only has counter, so that was kind of a deciding factor for me personally. But otherwise, if it did have Endeavor, I would have put it on that podium. By golly, I probably would have put it second to first place. I mean, that's how good Skarm is. But yeah, you know what? Skarm is honorable mention there. Second honorable mention, I would say, is Golem. I mean, Stealth Rock and counter, considering the fact that Golem is pretty easy to obtain, and also considering the fact that Golem is really simple to understand, I would say that Golem is a nice honorable mention. Steelix is also there in the honorable mention as well, because it does have Stealth Rock, and it does have a good attack and a really excellent defense stat. And also another honorable mention is Sudowoodo, because Sudowoodo does have Stealth Rock, it does have counter, and it does have Endeavor, and it doesn't really have any way to retaliate. Donphan does have a way to retaliate. It does have a priority move. Yes, Sudowoodo does have Sucker Punch, but you can't rely on your opponent to use an attack, as Shadow mentioned earlier in the broadcast. So that's why I couldn't really list Sudowoodo in the listings, but for anyone that wanted Sudowoodo, there you go. It's an honorable mention. So that is all the PokeMMO Sturdy Golden Globes episode of the Roy Rogers News Channel. Paparazzi and everybody, you can all get out now. And I know for a fact that Magnezone tried to sneak in, but we stopped him. So there we go. Magnezone is retired. He's a retired character. He's not coming back unless you in the comments want to revive him. So there we go. Shadow, I think this is a good place for us to sign off, right?
It seems so. I like it.
All right. And without further ado, let's go ahead and sign off. This is the Roy Rogers News Channel. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much, Shadow, for being a co-host of mine.
It was my pleasure, Roy, for real.
Certainly. Yeah, and I've wanted you as a co-host for years, so there you go. You're a really awesome guy. When I seen you in the global chat, you're quite an active guy, and I thought, man, you'd be such an excellent talent on the Roy Rogers News Channel.
I truly appreciate your input, though.
Certainly. Yeah, alright. And this is the Roy Rogers News Channel. Don't forget to comment down, subscribe to the channel, like and comment the basic here. And this is the Roy Rogers News Channel signing off. Fast, accurate, or biased, Roy Rogers News.